So in our last video, we learned how to build and dimension shape 1, and we did it in 3 extrusions. In this video, I want to build shape 1 again, but I want to do it a different way to sort of show you there's more than one way to build each shape. There's always more than one way to look at this. And so let's go ahead and start a new design. And I want to close out my data panel here. And I'm going to start with the front face again, but this time I'm not going to draw out this L in the beginning. I'm going to draw out an entire rectangle with the total height and the total width of our shape 1. So let's start a new sketch. Let's go to our front view and grab our rectangle tool. And the total height is 1.5 inches and the total width is 2.25 inches. And so let's place it on our origin and drag it up. And before I click again, I'm going to go ahead and type in my values. We said our height was 1.5, and then I'll hit tab on my keyboard and type in our width, which is 2.25, and hit enter on our keyboard. And now we have this fully dimensioned rectangle. I'm going to go ahead and finish our sketch and go to extrude. And I want to extrude it the full distance of shape 1. Well, the full distance we discovered in our last video was 1.5. And so I'll drag it out and I'll type in 1.5 inches and hit OK. And you might say, well, Mr. Anderson, this looks nothing like shape 1. Shape 1 has this sort of L shape to it. Well, bear with me. If you think about it, that L shape is just a rectangular cutout of this corner. And so let's go ahead and do that. Let's click on this face and go to Create New Sketch. And I want to zoom in a little bit, move it over. And let's grab our rectangle tool. And I'm going to tell this rectangle to be stuck to this top right corner. Once I have it hovering over that top right corner, I'm going to click and drag, and I'll click again over here. And you can see the top right corner of my rectangle is coincident to the top right corner of our shape. And if I go to my home view, hopefully you can see the L that I am now sketching out. And so I'm going to grab my dimension tool. And what is the constraint to this line? Well, if I compare it to this edge, that would be a distance of 0.75, as we said in the last video. So I'll type in 0.75 and hit enter on my keyboard. And then what about this line? Well, compared to this edge down here, that is also 0.75. And hit enter on our keyboard. And I like to go back and forth between my isometric view and my 2D view to kind of familiarize myself with seeing it from both views. But now that I have a fully constrained sketch, I'm going to go ahead and finish it and hit extrude. And I want to cut this rectangle out of the entire side of our shape. I'm going to go from distance to all and hit OK. And now you can kind of see that we built the exact same shape in this extrusion as before. If I double click on it, I can look at it and edit it. Hit OK. But I did it in 2 extrusions instead of just this one extrusion right here. But effectively, it does the same thing. And so once again, my point is there's more than one way to build each of your shapes. So for example, the first time we built shape 1, when we cut this hole out, we cut it out of a sketch on this face right here. I'm going to hit cancel and go back. This time, instead of cutting it out of this face, I'm going to cut it out of this top face, because if you think about it, it is a rectangular hole cut out of this face as well. So I'm going to click on this top face and go to Create New Sketch. And if it's rotated, I can rotate it back and forth to make sure I know what I'm looking at. And I'm going to grab my rectangle tool. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure this rectangle tool is stuck to this edge, is collinear to this edge before I click and drag and bring it in some distance. And just to make sure I know what I'm visualizing, I'm going to go back to my isometric view to kind of see it from this isometric view. You can see this rectangular hole that we're cutting out of the top face using this 2D rectangle. And so we got a few dimensions to give to this rectangle. I'm going to go to my dimension tool. And the first one I want to give is to this line. I'm going to compare it to this edge. And well, that is 0.5. And hopefully that's kind of obvious. We figured that out in the last video. But I want you to be able to see it from the top view, that this is clearly 0.5. If I hit enter on my keyboard, I'm going to right click and hit cancel to bring that dimension in a little bit closer. And I want to go back and forth between my isometric view a couple times to kind of show you how to tell from our top view what this dimension is for this edge. And so we also know, if we grab our dimension tool again, the distance between these two edges. We figured it out in our last video. That is also 0.5. And if you're not sure, again, how I got it, let me go to my isometric view, and maybe I'll make it a little bit clearer that the distance from this line to this edge is the same as the distance from this line to this edge, which is 0.5. And so we have one more line to dimension, and that is the distance between this line and this edge. If I go to my top view, the distance between these two lines, if I drag it up and click, that is clearly 0.75. And so I type in 0.75 and hit enter on our keyboard. And once again, if you're not sure how to see that dimension from the top view, let me go to the home view and show it to you. Hopefully it makes way too much sense. Let me rotate that. But from here, I'm going to finish my sketch and hit my home view. And I want to extrude this shape. So I'm going to click on this rectangle. I'm going to drag it down. And since it cuts all the way through to the bottom of our shape, I can change it from distance to all. And hit OK. And the first time we did this shape, we weren't able to do that. First time we did this shape, if I click on our extrusion 2, we had to type in a distance of 0.75. Well, that's because it doesn't cut all the way through our shape from this angle. I'm going to hit cancel and go back. This time we cut it out of our top face, and from this angle it does cut all the way through, so we were able to go, instead of a distance, to extent all. And so let's compare that to our last hole. The first time we built shape 1, we cut this hole out of this face. This time I want to cut it out of our top face. So I'm going to click on this top face and go to create new sketch. And again, if it's rotated the wrong way, you can always rotate it and move it around. I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and I'm going to tell it to be collinear to this edge and this edge here in the middle. And click. And so I've already got 2 of my constraints done. I'll go back to my isometric view to kind of show you what I just drew. I just drew this rectangle, which makes this rectangular hole cut out of our top edge. And we've got 2 lines left to dimension, so let's grab our dimension tool. And I'm going to start from this edge to this edge. So from this line to this edge is, as we said earlier, 0.25. And hopefully that makes it a little bit more clear that this is 0.25. Let me right click and hit cancel. I can even click on that dimension and drag it out and make it exactly the same. And so in case you were a little confused in the last video how I figured out that this edge here was 0.25, you can see that if it's 0.25 right here, it has to be 0.25 right here. The depth doesn't change. And so if you look, we have one more dimension to figure out. Well, we figured that out in our last video as well. That is this 1 inch from this edge to this edge. And so if I click my dimension tool, that's from this line to this line. So let's just type in 1 inch and hit enter. And now we have this fully constrained sketch. Let's go to finish sketch and hit extrude. Click on this rectangle, drag it down. And this time we can't go all the way through because it doesn't cut all the way through from this angle. It cuts down 0.5. And so let's type that in, 0.5. And we don't want it to go up 0.5. And so since it's going down, we need to type in a negative number. So let's type in negative 0.5 this time. And hit enter on our keyboard. And we are now finished with shape 1, done in a completely different way. And there's 2 ways you can tell that this was done in a completely different way. The first is our second version of shape 1 has 4 extrusion, whereas our first version had only 3. And the second is if we look at our individual sketches, our final sketch in this one was in our top face. Let me go ahead and hit finish sketch and compare that to our shape 1. Our final sketch in this one was in this side face, but they effectively do the same thing. And so once again, the point of this video was to show you there's more than one way to build each shape. So to wrap up, I do want you to go ahead and save this second version of shape 1, which has the 4 extrusions instead of 3. So let's go to save, and let's call this shape 2 done differently. And hit save, and we can check to make sure it's saved correctly by looking in our, and whoops, I didn't mean to name it shape 2. You probably noticed that while I was building it. This is not shape 2, this is shape 1. Shape 2 looks like this, which is what we'll do in our next video. So we can go ahead and right click on our shape and go to rename and name it shape 1 done differently and hit enter on our keyboard. But once you know that it's named correctly inside your data panel, you are done with this second version of shape 1.